So in terms of the textbook, this is an excellent textbook. It has many different editions, but it always focuses on sort of a pattern of how we look at nutrition. So in terms of the beginning of the book, the first couple of chapters talk about general nutrition, what you can expect, how there are fraudulent ads out there that promote nutrition in different ways, and you really have to be aware of what's the right way to approach nutrition. With that said, there are so many diets out there that conflict with one another. Have you noticed that some people will say, I feel so great being a vegan? Being a vegan feels so good, and our body doesn't need any animal meat, and it's the way to go. And then the next day you may run into someone who says, I am paleo all the way. I don't eat carbs, I only eat meat and chicken and fish and very little starch or carbs. Do you know people like this where you feel like your head's spinning, someone's telling you two different things? Then some people say eat every few hours. That's how you keep your metabolism up. I'm a strong proponent of that. When I meet with clients, who are trying to especially manage their weight, I tell them how important it is to eat every few hours. Keeps your metabolism fired up. It helps you avoid overeating at any meal. When you overeat a lot at a meal, you tend to store a good portion of it as fat because your body only needs a certain amount at a meal and for storage for the next few hours. Beyond that, whatever huge meal you eat, a portion of that gets stored as fat. So I'm a big proponent of wake up, eat right away, get your metabolism going, eat every few hours, meaning meals and snacks between meals, and that way you're not starving at night. However, some people are interested in intermittent fasting, where they fast for a good portion of the day and they only eat within, say, an 8-hour window. So some people say that that is the best way for fat loss and weight loss. And, I'm a very open-minded registered dietitian. I'm not here to say one way fits all. But I will tell you that a lot of diets that people follow actually set them up for failure. It's so restrictive, or it makes them so hungry that they end up binge eating, either because they're physically hungry or they're emotionally craving something. So you have to be really careful with diets that are restrictive or seem difficult to follow, because if it's not comfortable for you, there's generally a beginning and then there's an end to that diet. And when it ends, that's where a lot of us tend to really overeat the wrong foods. So I will say also that if you're an athlete, there are certain diets you shouldn't even consider. Some people talk about carbs not being a good thing, but if you're an athlete, you really need carbs. And I'm not talking you go to the gym for, 45 minutes and lift weights. If you're somebody who needs to be physically active, using your muscles on a regular basis for 2 hours straight, maybe you're a college athlete or maybe you're training on your own, carbohydrates are going to be your key to get through that workout, to have muscular endurance. How many of you here are college athletes? Any of you? Do you agree with what I'm saying, that if you don't eat carbs, you just don't perform as well? So not every diet fits everybody. There's definitely a range out there. So it's important for all of us to be open-minded about what other people do, but there are certainly some approaches that will not work for certain types of people. If you are the type of person who has, a lot of highs and lows during the day, you feel, you feel energetic when you eat something sugary or white flour, you get a burst of energy, but then you're tired an hour or so later, you might not have the right balance in your meal. You might be just munching on a bagel, grabbing an iced tea, thinking, well, there's no fat in a bagel or iced tea, but you've just had all carbs that can spike your blood sugar, and there's no protein or healthy fats or fiber in what I just said to help equalize your blood sugar. So where there's a high, there's a low, and that's where we can feel tired and think we're maybe hungry again or reach for caffeine, and then you might be on a caffeine roller coaster and a carb-sugar roller coaster, and it can really affect your mood. It can affect your fatigue, and it can affect your mood, and it can affect how well you concentrate in class. So my goal for you in taking this class is that personally, you improve how you feel. You improve how you feel mentally or physically or even in sports if you're an athlete. Because nutrition affects all of those areas of your life. So in terms of the textbook, it starts off with that general approach to nutrition. What are nutrients? Where do we get vitamins and minerals? Why do we need balance? Why do we need variety? How do we find calorie control? What are some fad diets out there we should be aware of? And then we move into how this food is digested, how our GI tract, how our blood sugar level are all affected by what we eat. We move into the macronutrients, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. There are good and bad aspects to each of those groupings of foods. There are some fats that are really unhealthy and some fats that are super healthy. There are some carbs that are super healthy and some carbs that you should really limit. And even with protein, some people way overeat protein, and some people don't eat enough or they don't eat complementary proteins, meaning together they form a complete protein that can help your body with all of its functions. For example, hormones, antibodies are all made from proteins. So once we get past that, then we get into vitamins and minerals. Two minerals that a lot of people have trouble with getting the adequate amount in this country are calcium and iron. Potassium is another one. So how do you make sure you're getting enough of those? What about vitamins? Which ones are important? Which foods are fortified with vitamins? Did you know that even some junky cereals, Lucky Charms and other junky cereals, have lots of vitamins added because they're fortified? Pop-Tarts are considered a breakfast food, so they're fortified with vitamins and minerals. I'm not saying that you should eat these foods, but I'm saying that we get vitamins from unlikely places. You know those fruit snacks that people like? If you ever look at that, that has a really good amount of vitamin C. It's not because it's grown from a tree. It's not plucked from a tree. You need a fruit snack. It's because vitamin C was added to it. But speaking of food that's been plucked from a tree, a food like an apple or an orange just naturally is chock full of vitamins, minerals, and fiber. All really, really important parts of the diet. But if you think about what we do to an apple, there's a lot we do in this country to the little apple, isn't there? If you eat an apple, it's 60 calories of all goodness. But if you make an apple pie, now you've added fat, sugar, and one piece is way more than 60 calories. If you think about a potato, a lot of people think potatoes are really fattening. If you have a half a potato, that's actually a good amount of carbohydrates. Sweet potatoes have even more nutrients. Because of their color, they have beta-carotene, which is a really important part of the diet. Anything deep orange in the vegetable and fruit family has that. But what if we take the potatoes and we make fries out of them? Whether it's regular fries or sweet potato fries, now we've added fat and salt. And if it's deep fried, it's often an unhealthy fat. You can make it in your oven a little healthier by just tossing it with a healthy oil and still get that crunchy effect. But if we go out and get fries, it's a different story. How many of you are French fry lovers? Any of you out there? Yeah, I'm a French fry person too. We all have our weakness. French fries is top 3 for me. Does that mean I eat fries every day? Absolutely not. But does it mean I can't resist fries when they're on the table? That's what it means. I really have a hard time resisting them, so I have little tricks. I try to order a salad every time I go out to dinner to distract me from all the foods on the table that may not be as healthy. So I might have a few fries, but then I'm filling up with a salad while I'm having my meal or before the meal. So you always want to think about your diet in terms of what proportion of it is healthy. And what's recommended is what's called the 80-20 rule. And we have a worksheet. I have a worksheet for you to fill out so you can see what portion of your diet is healthy. For example, would you choose full-fat ice cream or low-fat ice cream most of the time? Would you choose fruit or cookie most of the time if you had a choice? Would you choose steak or fish if you had a choice? It's okay to have steak once in a while. It's a good source of iron. But this is asking you, what do you usually choose when you're faced with both? And if 80% of the time you're making healthier choices, then you're probably a really healthy eater. That's the 80-20 rule. You don't have to make perfect choices all the time. In fact, I find people who make perfect choices all the time, and I've come across a few people over the years. They tend to only be eating like that for the past month or 2 months, and then they fall off of that. Or maybe they're bodybuilders, so they're super strict. But unless you have an intense motivator, it's very hard to eat perfectly most of the time, and nobody expects it, and dietitians don't even eat that way. Right? So you really want to, in that case, say to yourself, well, if I'm not expected to always eat healthy, Then the next step is you want to think about what foods do you really, really love? And what amount of that food would you be satisfied with? And how often should you buy it? And which ones in your house are too tempting for you to be around? You know, if you have cookies on the counter, that's like probably calling your name. But if the cookies are in the cupboard, out of your eyesight, then maybe it's not calling your name. Right? If you can possibly substitute the fries with vegetables in a restaurant, then you won't be as tempted. Right? Maybe someone else is getting fries and you'll have a few of theirs. So you really want to ask yourself, what changes can you make? Sometimes it's just modifying one of your favorite recipes. Maybe you don't cook, but one day you'll probably start cooking a few meals, and you can make some really easy changes. If you love lasagna, you could decide just to cut whatever the recipe says for cheese, cut that amount in half and add more vegetables. Instead of having a layer of cheese on top, have a sprinkle on top. When you order pizza, you can ask for just a light sprinkle of cheese on top. Or if you love pizza just the way it is, maybe you could decide instead of having 4 slices, you'll have 2 slices and you'll order a salad to help fill you up. Maybe you make a beef stew, and instead of having as much beef as you currently have, you'll have half the amount of beef and add more vegetables. Same with chili. So nutrition should not be about suffering and not having your favorite foods. It's about either having it less often, smaller portions, or modifying it. Okay? After we get past proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, then we get into fluids. How are we affected by sports drinks, caffeine, coffee, tea, diet sodas? What about alcohol? There's actually pros and cons to that entire list I just said. Maybe not tea. There aren't too many cons to having tea. But it depends on how much caffeine it is. Certain groups of people should not have too much caffeine. So we'll go over that. But sports drinks are a useful tool for a lot of people, especially athletes who are working out beyond an hour. But sitting in class and having a sports drink is not a great idea. It's unnecessary added calories and sugar. In terms of alcohol, a small amount of alcohol may be correlated with reduced heart disease. But excess alcohol is correlated with increased cancer risk. So you want to understand the pros and cons of both, and your textbook is great at explaining all of that. Beyond that, we get into weight control. Weight control isn't just about how you look in your clothes. Weight control is a major, what's called cause of death these days. We used to talk about smoking as the leading cause of death, and now we're saying obesity, sedentary living is either as bad, if not worse. So that's considered like a cause of death these days. So that's why we spend a lot of time. When I say we, I mean nutritionists, especially those working in public health who are trying to educate a lot of people. I used to work for the Department of Health in Rhode Island, and our job was to say, how do we get those people out there to make healthy changes? What are public health initiatives we can try? It may sound so elementary, but I think one of the best public health nutrition ideas was something that came out a while ago, many years ago. Now we don't really see it because we've sort of changed the number. But years ago, people weren't eating enough fruits and vegetables. And a public health department in California came up with a very simple idea called 5 a day. And everywhere in supermarkets, there were little tabletop displays, all around the country. It spread like wildfire. This little sticker with pictures of fruits and vegetables, and it said 5 a day. Are you getting your 5 a day? Such a simple message, but it just made people think twice about it. Since then, we've realized we need way more than 5 a day, so that campaign isn't as active. But that's what public health nutritionists do. We just try to get the message out, get it in people's brains that, nutrition should be an important part of their day. So weight control in these public health messages are a really important part of what you hear when you see nutritionists on television or in lectures or magazine articles. And because weight contributes to the risk of diabetes and heart disease and stroke and cancers, which are the leading causes of death, it's a really important subject. Some people lose weight a healthy way, and some people lose weight an unhealthy way. But some people smoke, which raises your metabolism, and they're thin, but they're not healthy. Other people have learned to be healthy while watching their weight, and that's, of course, the magic combination. How do you eat healthy and manage your weight? How do you get in all the nutrients you need without overeating? So after weight control, we'll talk about sports nutrition, which is pretty fascinating. As I said, carbs are really important for sports, but there's so much information about sports nutrition that might surprise you, like when to eat and what portion of your diet should be carbs and how fluids are a part of that, and what kinds of what are called ergogenic aids, which are supposed to help athletes, which ones work and which ones are false claims. Then we get into the life cycle. And the life cycle will take everything you've learned in this textbook and in the class and weave it into a person's life and how nutrition plays a role all throughout their lives. The first place nutrition affects you is when you're in the womb. When you're not even out of the womb yet, you can be affected sometimes permanently by what your mother did or didn't do. I taught a class years ago, and somebody was in a wheelchair, and I didn't know why he was in a wheelchair, but it turned out, he told me later on, that he thought I'd find it interesting as a nutritionist, that he had what's called spina bifida. Have you heard of spina bifida? It can cause partial or full paralyzation, and he was paralyzed his entire life. And when he told me, he was in a wheelchair, and I said, "Oh, I'm sorry." And he said, "Oh, don't be sorry. This is all I know. I've been in a wheelchair my whole life." He was a really funny, nice guy, successful, had a great job, married, kids. But he was born with partial paralyzation because his mother did not have one vitamin when she was pregnant. And that vitamin is a B vitamin called folate, folic acid. Since then, the government has gotten involved, and we've put folate into the food supply, and that has reduced the number dramatically. People are also encouraged to take their multivitamin when they're pregnant, which reduces the number dramatically. So we have public health initiatives to help with that problem, because that's a big problem. I had a student in class once, and afterwards she told me she had spina bifida. She didn't have a wheelchair or a cane, but she had a limp. I mean, that sounds like a big deal to just have a limp, but can you play sports if you have a big limp? No, so it affected her life permanently. So this happens all the time, and I think the first time our government got involved was the early 1900s, when our food supply was impacted in a positive way by the government after it was impacted in a negative way by food manufacturers. Does anyone ever have a loaf of bread that looks totally different from the bread you get in a package in the supermarket? It's like coarse and grainy and dark and hard and heavy. Do any of you ever see bread like that? Sometimes bakeries or like nicer stores might have that kind of bread. It's not easy to find, but that's how bread used to look. You know, it was really made from wheat stalks, and it had all the fiber and vitamins and minerals of the wheat that grew out of the ground. So it was close to nature. And then somewhere along the way, someone decided, wouldn't it be great if bread was soft and white? And so they processed and bleached it, and the process lost all of the fiber and a lot of the vitamins and minerals. And people started getting anemia, iron deficiency anemia. So then the government had to get involved and started fortifying, requiring that these companies add iron back into their foods and some B vitamins as well. So that was a positive change, but if only we stuck with that original bread, we wouldn't have had all those problems, right? So having variety in your diet allows you to access all these nutrients that you may not even be thinking about. We've been able to eliminate a lot of these imbalances because a lot of foods are enriched and fortified, but a varied diet is really the way to go. So in the life cycle, we'll also talk about what kids need when they're toddlers and infants. Is it okay to have regular milk if you run out of formula? Is formula okay instead of breast milk? What kinds of foods cause choking, and what kinds of foods might aggravate ADHD? And how do you avoid childhood obesity? What about when kids are teenagers? How do you avoid losing calcium so you don't get osteoporosis? And what about when you're an adult? How do you change your diet so you don't get the diseases that your parents may have suffered from when they were middle-aged? So all of that is your life cycle, and nutrition plays a role at every point throughout your life. So that's what we'll be going over in class. Any questions before we put that in your notes? All right, so why don't you pull out your notes, and you can see that the first line there talks about quackery, which I mentioned. Nutrition was first recognized in the early 1900s, and quackery and fraud followed. Let me give you an example of what quackery and fraud look like. I apologize, this is not a great overhead projector. But you can see over here, there's like a nice-looking fit couple. According to this ad, what they did was they drank this to look that way. Does that sound plausible? No, I mean, they're fitness models. They probably run 3 to 5 miles a day, and they have trainers, and they eat a certain way because they get paid to look like that. But what they wrote on here is, you could lose up to 10 pounds this weekend just from drinking this. So first of all, that doesn't make much sense. Second of all, even if they could prove that that drink, a certain amount of that drink could cause you to lose 10 pounds in one weekend, what do you think is in that drink? How does your body weight change the most? What is your body mostly made of? Water. So if they're trying to help you lose 10 pounds in one weekend, chances are it's probably just a diuretic in there, which means it flushes water. Maybe there's a laxative. So you lose water, you go to the bathroom more, you have bowel movements, and maybe magically you lose 10 pounds. But that's not fat loss, right? That's just temporary due to something that was put in this. So there's a lot of quackery out there where people will try to convince you of something by showing you pictures. And you have to really think about what they're showing you. For those of you, there's a lot of athletes in this class. For those of you who are athletes, you may have had to do the stim. Have you ever done the stim machine? It looks like this, where you put sensors. Sorry about this overhead. You put sensors on your stomach or any other body part, and you turn the machine on, and it vibrates your muscles. The whole idea is it vibrates them to get stronger. Has anyone ever done the stim machine? Yeah, is it fun? Would you want to do it? I mean, you're probably happy when it's over, right? I know I did the stim machine. I played tennis in college, and I was injured a lot, and it's not that I hated this, but I was very happy when it was over. And what they're saying in this ad is, they're trying to sell this now for weight loss, and they're saying strengthen, shape, tone, and improve all muscle groups in just 30 minutes a day while reading or watching TV. Now they're saying you don't even have to exercise to get the benefits of your muscles toning. But obviously, these people, again, are fitness models, and that's just nonsense. So there's a lot of quackery and fraud, and that's what I mean by this. A lot of areas of study are very old, like hundreds or thousands of years old. Nutrition's been around since the early 1900s. So it's really just 100 years old, and that's where you get a lot of misinformation out there. So you really want to go to a registered dietitian. RD stands for registered dietitian. That means somebody has standardized education and training. It's sort of like, would you rather go to a registered nurse or somebody who reads about nursing? Probably a registered nurse. It's the same thing with nutrition. You want somebody who's had thorough education and training. I have a master's in health and fitness, but that's not the thing that cements my nutrition knowledge. Getting my RD is. And that's after studying nutrition in college. It's spending 9 months, sometimes people spend a year, rotating in different areas of nutrition. So different departments in a hospital, oncology, which is cancer unit, diabetes, pregnancy, renal, learning about dialysis, how nutrition relates to dialysis. Also, community nutrition programs like WIC. Have you heard of WIC? Women, Infants, and Children. They help low-income mothers who are pregnant or have young children eat healthy. They give free nutrition information, vouchers for healthy foods. It's a fantastic government-sponsored program. So as RDs in training, you go to all of these programs so you really understand the impact of nutrition. And that's why if you or your parents ever need help with nutrition, they should go to a registered dietitian. So are nutritionists, people call themselves nutritionists, are they always RDs? The answer is no. However, a lot of people call themselves nutritionists. When I meet someone at a party and they ask what I do for work, I often just say I'm a nutritionist. And then sometimes they'll say, oh, are you a registered dietitian? And I'll say, yeah. And they'll say, what do you do? I teach at a college. I see people privately. But I like the term nutritionist. I think it's like friendlier than saying I'm a registered dietitian wherever I go. But that is the credential you want to ask about. Right? It's like someone saying they're a nurse, they're a registered nurse. Okay? The goals of nutrition research, in the past, they were to eliminate deficiency diseases. Today, they're to reduce dietary excesses and imbalances. Imbalances, that means unbalanced eating. Do you know anyone who looks decent? Their weight is fine, but they don't eat balanced? They don't eat that healthy? I know someone in college who looked perfect. She looked like a model. She ate a bag of chips this big every afternoon, and then she didn't go to dinner with the rest of us because she was full. She ended up having about the same amount of calories as if she went to dinner. She probably had about 400 or 500 calories of chips instead of a 400 or 500 calorie balanced dinner with protein and vegetables. So her weight was fine, but that's certainly not balanced eating. Do you know people, especially kids, who eat, maybe 5 or 6 foods? Hot dogs, hamburgers, grilled cheese, pizza. What's another one? Chicken nuggets, right? A lot of kids are growing up very unbalanced in their eating. They don't have enough fruits and vegetables and whole grains and fiber. How does that happen? How do you have a kid who only eats those foods? The short answer is that parents ask their kids what they want to eat and they make it for them. That's really not how it should go. The parents can ask for input. You're in the mood for chicken or fish? Do you like this sauce or that sauce? Do you like this vegetable or that vegetable? What do you think we should get this week? But there should be a balanced meal presented or balanced snacks, healthy snacks presented to the child, so the child isn't always deciding what he or she wants. Right? Because kids aren't born just liking foods. I have fraternal twins, and it's very interesting to have fraternal twins because they're born on the same day, and they're born growing up similarly, but they're just siblings born on the same day. They're 2 different people. My daughter was actually born loving fruits and vegetables. She is the type of kid who will have dinner, have maybe some ice cream or something sweet, and then just for fun go back to salad because she actually likes salad. Or she'll choose fruit over dessert. She's just always been like that. From the time she was born, she's still like that. My son was born loving chocolate chip cookies and steak. I actually remember the first time he had steak, he was the happiest I've ever seen him. He was 14 months old, and I thought, I discovered his favorite food at 14 months. He just couldn't get it in fast enough. And to this day, as a teenager, he probably would have steak and chocolate chip cookies at most meals if I didn't encourage him in different ways to have fruits and vegetables. He knows that I will always put a vegetable on his plate, so he just sort of eats baby carrots or some bell pepper strips. I try to make it taste good, I'll roast vegetables. Roasted broccoli tastes a lot better than steamed broccoli, in my opinion, a little seasoning. So I try to make it taste good, but that's sort of a rule in our house that at dinner every night there's a vegetable on the plate. And after dinner, if my children are hungry, people are surprised that sometimes that I have junky stuff in my house as a dietitian. But I buy ice cream, I buy low-fat Yasso bars, but I also buy full-fat ice cream. I alternate. And some people are surprised that I have cookies or ice cream in my house. But, there's a way to have that in the house. If my children are hungry and they've been eating sweets, I might say, well, why don't you have some fruit now before you have something else? And they will, because they know that I'll buy less sweets if they don't throw in some fruit in between all those sweet snacks. Right? So you have to train kids, and as an adult or a young adult, you might have to start training yourself to eat differently by those little rules. Telling yourself, I'm going to have some vegetable every night with dinner, even if it's just a raw vegetable that you munch on. Or maybe you have a rule in your mind, from now on I'm going to try to have 2 pieces of fruit a day. That's how people become healthy eaters. It's just little increments that they take upon themselves. You may come from a family that never thought about nutrition, but you may also come from a family where you're the first person to go to college. There's always a first for something, right? So just because you grew up a certain way, maybe not eating healthy, that has nothing to do with how you will decide to eat as an adult. And you may be the first person that passes on to the next generations. You may be the first person to embrace a balanced, nutritious diet. So hopefully what you learn in class will help you with that. So moving on, we have what factors reduce deficiencies, because we used to have a lot of deficiencies. We have an abundant food supply. We have educational programs. We have foods that are fortified with vitamins and minerals. Fortified. So those cereals I mentioned, they have added vitamins and minerals. Or sometimes orange juice is calcium fortified, right? Regular orange juice doesn't have calcium. It has to be calcium fortified. 5 of the 10 leading causes of death are linked in part to one's diet. What are your guesses as to what those leading causes of death are related to nutrition? What have you heard is the leading cause of death in this country? Yeah. Heart disease. Yeah, that's actually number 1. What else is related to your diet? Problems in this country. Yeah. Diabetes. Yeah, that's a really important one because what we're learning now is that diabetes may be leading to more deaths than we actually once thought. And the reason is diabetes actually doubles your risk of heart disease. So maybe people have heart disease, but it was aggravated by diabetes. And diabetes is aggravated by excess weight. And what do you think the number 1 problem in this country is? Obesity. So it's all, unfortunately, related. What else besides heart disease and diabetes do you think is a leading cause of death in this country related to nutrition? Well, so obesity is a huge factor leading to these issues, but these are causes of death. So obesity is like a factor that contributes to this. So let's talk about obesity. Obesity contributes to diabetes. It contributes to heart disease. So what was that? So cholesterol is a part of heart disease, but what else have you heard is high that a lot of adults have? Maybe people in your family are dealing with this. Not high cholesterol, but high what? Blood pressure, that's right. So high blood pressure is a very common problem related to excess weight as well, and diet. Stroke is a problem related to diet, and the other one is cancer. Not all forms of cancer are related to diet. If someone gets leukemia, that has nothing to do with their diet. If a 5-year-old gets cancer, it's not because that 5-year-old had junk food. In fact, not all types of diabetes are related to diet. Have you heard there are 2 types of diabetes? So we used to call it insulin-dependent and non-insulin dependent. Now we just say type 1 and type 2. Or we say adult onset. So there's different ways that people say it, but one is the kind you get because it's in your genes, but it's aggravated by excess weight. The other one is the one you get because you unfortunately have it in your genes or it's an autoimmune disorder. Do you know kids who get diabetes? Yeah, they did not bring that on themselves. However, unfortunately, there are more and more teenagers who are very overweight getting the type of diabetes we only used to see in adulthood. So teenagers can still get this lifestyle-related disease. So certain type of cancer, certain types of diabetes are actually not related. And for heart disease, sometimes people have really, really tough genes for heart disease. I actually counseled an 11-year-old once who was in a heart disease prevention center. His father, unfortunately, died of a heart attack at 37. So his mother brought him to this clinic because he was already showing signs that he had high cholesterol. And I felt really badly counseling this 11-year-old to really watch all of the sources of fat, especially trans fats, that could raise his cholesterol. But he was starting medication at a young age. He was following a strict diet at a young age because of his genetics. So a lot of this has to do with genetics, and a lot of this has to do with diet, and some has nothing to do with diet. Other factors: exercise, lifestyle habits, age, health, gender, and which one did I not mention in that list that can contribute to whether or not you get a disease? Genetics, that's right, genetics. In fact, in your book, there's a scorecard for how long will you live. So what you do is you answer questions about your lifestyle habits, but some of the questions have to do with your genetics, male, female, how old you are. So I'd like you to do that scorecard to see how all that plays a role. What affects our food choices? There's convenience, there's cravings, there's taste, cost, health beliefs, other beliefs or other health issues. Maybe it's a religious reason you eat something. Maybe literally every time you eat something, it's just because it's convenient. It's there, it's the res calf, it's fast. Maybe you're the type of person totally driven by taste. You will not eat something unless you really like it. And maybe you're totally driven by cost, which is typical during college years. Maybe you buy ramen noodles because it's like 33 cents. Or you buy mac and cheese because it's super cheap. Right? So we make different choices based on a lot of things. But we have to really be in tune with why we're choosing what we choose. So why we eat, desire, habit, emotional eating. What's emotional eating? So you said when you're sad, you eat what? Chocolate. So that's your connection. You know what? Some people are emotional eaters during happy times. Like something really good happens, and the first thing you think of is celebrating with food. Some people are both. Some people eat with every emotion. It's a really difficult thing to be a very emotional eater because you probably will have a hard time managing your weight as emotions continue to intensify as you get older. It might be stressful to be a college student, but it's stressful when your kid is sick or when you have to pay a mortgage. So is food going to be your crutch? If so, that's a hard habit to break. So there's a lot of ways to break emotional eating, like mindful eating, being aware of why you're eating, meditation. But really, I have found what's most effective is daily exercise. If you eat in response to emotions, just breaking a sweat every day has been shown to be really effective for emotional eaters. I knew somebody who just walked out of the house every time he wanted to eat for emotions. He just literally walked down the block and back just to clear his head. So there's a lot of ways to deal with that, but that is a big reason why we eat. And the last one is a physiological need, which is hunger. How many of you mostly eat only when you're hungry? That's the main reason you eat. So for those of you who only eat when you're hungry, you're going to have a much easier time managing your weight because you're not eating out of habit, desire, or emotions. The rest of us have to kind of have things in place, right? We have to say to ourselves, okay, I'm going to watch TV, but I am not going to bring the bag of chips to the TV because, I'm just going to get lost in the food. Or I'm not going to keep this, and this in the house because I'll go for it if I'm having a bad day. So all of those are factors in how we help manage ourselves. The goal, again, is to eat healthier versions of the foods you enjoy, which is not always easy, but it's definitely doable. Food advertising is tough. The majority of commercials, especially geared toward children and aired on the weekend, are for high-fat, high-sugar foods. You rarely see advertisements for fruits and vegetables, right? So it's all about appealing to your cravings. And it's hard to resist that. But one of the best ways you can resist that is to make sure you eat often enough that you're not overly hungry and give in to those cravings. Like I said, health fraud, billions of dollars are spent on products with false or unproven effects. They could be costly, useless, harmful, deadly. They can take the place of a legitimate, helpful form of treatment. Years ago, there was a lawsuit against parents because their son had cancer, and the parents were really into natural healing methods, and they didn't want their son to have chemotherapy. And the doctor felt so strongly that the chemotherapy was the only thing that could save this boy's life that the state actually got involved and required the parents to take him to chemotherapy. So it's great to have alternative health issues like turmeric. Have you heard of turmeric? It's a natural supplement that helps with pain management for a lot of people who have just chronic pain. So that really is effective for a lot of people. Some people do acupuncture to manage pain or other issues. So alternative health is a great thing, but there has to be somewhere in the middle where people find a happy medium. In terms of credible nutrition websites, if you want to learn more about nutrition, you want to look for websites that end in .gov, .edu, or .org. You want to use caution with websites that end in .com or .net because they may or may not be credible. They may just be trying to sell you something. Let's talk about nutrition research. These are guidelines that are determined and given to the public. The first type of study is called an epidemiological study. This is where we observe similarities among groups of people. For example, people in Italy tend to have less heart attacks than people in this country. Have you heard that? Have you heard that people in Europe have less heart issues than we do? So what are your thoughts on that? Why do you think people in other countries, let's say Italy, What do you think it is about the way people live in Italy that allows them to have less heart attacks? Any guesses? Yeah. Maybe it's just that they're more active, which is true for most of Europe, right? They walk more places, there's less cars on the road, more bicycle usage. What else could it be? Yeah. Less processed foods. So many countries, especially Italy and other European countries, they cook a whole lot more. They use fresh vegetables. They use even fresh pasta. There's just less reliance on fast food. Maybe that's the whole answer. But what else could it be? What else have you heard is going on in Italy that we don't have here? Yeah. Yeah, maybe that's the whole answer. Maybe they always have smaller portion sizes, so they're storing less fat, and that leads to less heart attacks. But what else could it be? There's a long list of things they do differently in Italy than here. Maybe it's just the olive oil. They use hardly any other hardened fats. They use more of a healthy olive oil. Maybe it's all about the wine. Wine has been shown to reduce, were you going to say that? Yeah, wine has been shown to reduce heart attack risk. Maybe that's the whole answer. It's hard to say, isn't it? And that's why it's an epidemiological study. You're just making observations. So can that study determine cause and effect? No, they're just observations. That's why we have human intervention or clinical studies. Those are the studies you hear advertised on TV where they're looking for participants. People sometimes are paid money to be part of a study. And they're determining something specific, like a specific drug or supplement or herb or treatment. However, that study, you have to be very careful with that study. You need a lot of people. You need it to be double blind, which means the researcher doesn't really know who's taking what, and the person doesn't know who's taking what. Why is that? Because there's a psychological impact. What if I divided this class right down the middle and I said, I'm going to have you all take this vitamin that's going to help you do really well in this class because it's going to help your brain retain more information. And I said, but you guys aren't getting that supplement. You might do better in this class because you take it every day and you might think, I'm retaining information, and maybe you'll study harder. Right? So a lot of it is psychological. I had the psychological effect in college. I remember going to study with my friend. We were going to have a late night, and I said, I just need to stop and get a Diet Sprite because I really need to stay up late. And she said, Diet Sprite doesn't have caffeine. And I said, oh, trust me, Diet Sprite has caffeine. I was totally wrong. Diet Sprite doesn't have caffeine. But for 2 months, I had been drinking it to help keep me awake, and it was working because it was psychological. It doesn't even have sugar. There's nothing in Diet Sprite to help a person stay awake. It was a psychological impact. Right? So all of us can fall for it, and that's why studies have to be very carefully controlled with the researcher and the participant not knowing what they're getting. Can that study determine cause and effect? Yes, that's the whole point of it. That's why millions are spent on studies like this. That's why the top researchers are pulled in to work on these studies. So these human intervention or clinical trials, that can determine cause and effect. In your book, there's something called Healthy People. There changes all the time. Healthy People 2020,